Okay, so what I'd like to show you now are some additional variations to our model going beyond the base plate here. We're just going to create a block over here with some fillets in it and some holes and a shell in it eventually too. So you can see what some of these other features and sketch elements will do for you. First thing we're going to do is we're going to do a sketch fillet in this. So if we go back to our sketch 1, and this also gives you an opportunity to see how you can edit your model, because right now this isn't just set in stone. We can make modifications to it, which is a really nice aspect of parametric design that we're engaged in right now. We can make modifications to it. So let's right click on sketch 1 with your mouse. Let's go up to that button up here in the shortcut menu, and again, if you rest your cursor over any of these commands up here, it gives you kind of shows you in text what that command actually is. So we're going to go to edit sketch, and we're going to make an edit to that sketch. So we want to make this normal to our screen. So let's go up here to our view orientation. Let's go and open that up. And we're going to go to the normal button so we can see it straight on. We're going to scroll out a little bit with our middle mouse button. And let's go up to our sketch tab on our command manager. And we're going to cover the command manager in a little bit more detail later. And right now we've visited the feature tab and the sketch tab in the command manager. But one thing we want to do, we've already visited the center rectangle. There's other elements in there too that we're going to touch on through the rest of the quarter. Slot tool is really kind of fun, but line is pretty basic. You have a circle. We're going to use the circle when we put in a hole. But one thing you want to use here right now is called the Sketch Fillet. And what we're going to do is we're going to put in a fillet on various items in here. So we can fillet these corners or put a round in these corners up here. And the way you do that, and there's a couple different options for the fillet, especially when it comes to a feature fillet, but it's a little bit more basic with the sketch fillet. When you have your properties manager open, you have this light blue dialog box over here. It's asking for a selection in your graphics area. So let's go ahead and set the parameters for our sketch fillet. Maybe make that half an inch. See what that looks like. So remember, we have a 4-inch side over here. If we put a half inch in there, that's going to take 1 whole inch off that side and put a round there. So we're going to make that 1 inch. And it's still asking for a selection or modeling area. So if you take our cursor over here to the modeling area and click in each one of these points, you don't necessarily have to click on the sides like you have to in SolidWorks. You could actually do a single selection. And remember, every time you can shorten up your mouse gestures or mouse travel, you're going to save time when you're doing your modeling. So if you select on this point, and you're going to get this error in here, and it's because it's going out of symmetry. But if you read that, a segment being filleted has a midpoint or equal length or equidistant relation. Equidistant relation will be deleted and geometry might move if the fillet is created. Do you want to continue? Yes. The answer is yes. And we're going to correct this because we're going to go all the way around this model and we're going to put in those fillets. So that typically happens when we have an equal relationship in here because it's potentially going to make an alterations to that. It's going to make that a little bit less than an inch, and the same thing over here, but it's going to get corrected once we go around the model. So yes, it's going to be the answer. Same thing over here. We're going to get that dialog box here and then here. And it didn't affect it over here because we don't have an equal relationship over here. But now it's back to symmetrical. You can see the yellow preview of what we're going to get. And if it looks good to you, go to the green check mark or right click and choose a green check mark there too. Or go over here and do the green check mark. And what that does is it puts rounds on that corner. And go to the green check mark one more time. Let's go to rebuild up here on our menu bar. And now we're going to see our model. We can see that it actually put our round in that corner. So that's your sketch fillet. Okay, now that we made modifications to our sketch, let's make modifications to our base plate. Let's make modifications to our feature. And we can do the same thing over here that you did with the sketch. You right click on it and you can choose from the shortcut menu what you would like to make modifications to. You can edit the feature or the sketch from that view, or you can go out in the modeling area, in the graphics area, and do the same thing. Right click over here. You can make the modifications to that part, that feature, or the sketch that you want to do so. So let's go ahead and edit the feature. And this time, instead of a 1/4 of an inch mid-plane extrusion, let's make this really big. Let's make that 5 inches. See what that looks like. It kind of looks like a 6-volt battery if you've ever seen those. You used to have those in those old flashlights, but now everything's on LEDs, so you don't quite need the power that these old flashlights have. But kind of resembles that. But yeah, that's kind of a quick side. Let's go to the green check mark and kind of put that into place. So now you can see what that looks like. And if you want to make modifications to this yet another way, if you were to click on the model a little bit, on any surface on that model, and sometimes you have to spin it, but the dimensions come up which actually define that model. So if you want to change that 4-inch dimension on the side, which is going to change the other 4-inch dimension up here, which is going to be equal to it, we can do that. Our fillet's going to be 1 inch. We can change that too. The height's going to be 5 inches. The height's in blue, which shows you that it's part of the extrude. And just for the final, let's go ahead and click on that, and we're going to make that 3. So something is a little bit more squarish. So that's a modification to our feature. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put in some holes into our part so far. And right now we have one feature in place driven by a sketch. And the next thing we want to do on our feature manager is we want to, on our command manager, we want to choose a different feature. It's going to be the extruded cut. We're going to put in some round holes. So the way you do that, and it's going to be in a very similar way that we've done before, what we want to do is we want to choose a surface on our model so far to put those holes in. Or if you wanted to, we could still pick like the top plane, front plane, or the right plane to do that too. Remember, those planes are in the middle of our model. But we're not reliant upon these planes. Now that we have some surfaces already created here in SolidWorks, we could choose much more than just the 3 planes. We have the top and bottom of our part, we have the left and right side, we have the front and back, and we also have these surfaces over here too where the fillets are, as well as our plane. So we're adding more complexity to our model now. So let's go ahead and choose this surface, and let's go ahead and make that normal too, so we can see it right off the top, and let's go ahead and put in some holes. Of course, the very easiest hole we can do, if we, after choosing that surface, we can go to Sketch, go to the circle, go to the circle command, and what that does is it's going to go ahead and sketch a circle out from a point that we select. So in a very similar manner that we did with the center rectangle, the circles are going to do the same thing. So we're going to drag our cursor in here. We're going to select the origin and sketch that out. It's actually the projected origin onto that surface. And we're going to sketch a circle out. And that's probably the easiest sketch you can draw in SolidWorks. It's just 2 clicks. 1 click to define the center of that circle, 2 clicks to define the diameter of it. So let's go to Smart Dimension, kind of like what we did with the rectangle, center rectangle that we chose. We're going to put a dimension on it, so we're going to choose Smart Dimension. Click in that circle, we're going to drag that out. We're going to make that about 2 inches. And now we have that in place. If we go to Features, Extruded Cut, let's go ahead and turn our model a little bit to see what we're going to do. A couple of different options in here. We're going to start from that sketch plane. We're not going to make any modifications to that. But the direction, we might want to make modifications to this too. Right now it's blind, which is probably okay. Right now it's going to go down a depth of 1/4 of an inch. But what we really want to do is we want to put that all the way through. So instead of blind, let's go ahead and do through all. And if we do through all, now you can see the preview of that, the yellow preview. It's going to go pretty much through the whole model. Next option over here is through all both. It's going to go in 2 directions, but it's really not anything up here for it to go through. So it's probably not going to work too well for us, but what it does is it opens up the direction too, and does it through all in that direction too. So we're going to unclick that and kind of suppress that and put that out of the way. And we're going to cover a lot of these other things in here too, like up to next, up to surface, offset from surface, up to body, and mid-plane. We're going to cover that in a little bit more detail later in other videos when we have more complex geometry. But right now, we're going to choose this sketch plane to do that. We're going to do through all, which is going to go all the way through the model, and we're going to go to the green check mark, and now we have our hole. We can verify that by spinning that around. You can see the hole from the top, you can see it from the bottom, and that's in place, and that looks pretty good to me so far. So we talked about fillets 2 videos ago, and that's going to be a sketch fillet, but you can do the same thing as a feature fillet. And the thing about the feature fillet, there are a lot more options with the feature fillet. We're just going to do the basics right now, but let's go ahead and put a round on the top here, and maybe on that hole too, and let me show you how that works. So if we go to the Feature tab on our Command Manager, we're going to scroll over here to Fillet. Complement to the fillet is called the chamfer, which is kind of related to it. Chamfer puts a flat edge in all this. But for now, we're going to look at the fillet. And if we start from the top and work our way down, here we're going to do manual as opposed to fillet expert. We're going to choose this as the default setting, which is going to be the constant size fillet, but there are other options in here too. Variable size, we have a face fillet and a full round fillet too. So items fillet, this is pretty typical of features. It's got a dialog box open, a selection box. It's light blue. That's going to remain active as we make our other choices down here. And we're going to pretty much keep a lot of these other options open too. We're just going to keep them as a default selection in here and just kind of use those as they present themselves. A couple things up here I want to show you about, but let's go ahead and create perhaps a value for that fillet. We're going to make that 0.3 inches, a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. Now, show selection toolbar. If we go up here to items to fillet, let's talk about some of these selections up here. There's a toolbar that kind of comes next to the cursor when you actually select an edge or a face for the fillet, and it's okay to go ahead and keep that on. Tangent propagation, we're going to go ahead and keep that checked too, but I'm going to show you here in a moment what that does and what that doesn't do when we have that selected or not selected. We want to make sure we have a full preview on this, not a partial preview or no preview. We want to make sure that it works, because the thing about the previews, if you see the preview, your fillet's going to work. If there's one thing in your model, if you don't work with your model correctly, a lot of things that fail in your model when you make modifications to your model geometry or sketch geometry, a lot of times these fillets are going to fail. So you want to make sure that you have this put together correctly, and you want to make sure you do the preview on that too. So let's see what tangent propagation does. If we were to click on this edge over here in the modeling area, which is going to fill this box over here, the selection box, tangent propagation is going to take everything that's connected to that tangentially and put that fillet in there. So if we, one thing to keep in mind about SolidWorks, once something is selected, it turns green in the modeling area, but we can select that one more time and it will deselect it. Everything else is green because it's anticipating it's going to do the tangent propagation. But let me show you what happens if we don't do the tangent propagation. Just like this line, what it does is just going to put that fillet on that edge and kind of taper it on the neighboring edges over here too. So that's the difference between tangent propagation and not. So if you were to select that, it's going to do that. So you can see right away the value of doing something like that. If the desire is to go ahead and put a fillet all the way around the top here, tangent propagation is going to save you, what, about 7 or 8 mouse clicks? Definitely a time saver. Let's go ahead and select this edge too. So we're going to have a fillet not only along the edge over here, but the edge of the hole. Once everything looks good, let's go ahead and go do the green check mark. You could also change your selection over here too, by the way. You can see this dialog, kind of like a leader on a dimension over here. You can change that value in here too. If we want to make that 0.4, we could do that too. So we're going to go to the green check mark, and there's our fillet, our feature fillet. Okay, this is going to be kind of fun. Let's do a shell. What we're going to do is we're going to shell our model out. And it may not seem apparent right away what shell is going to do. Add seashells maybe, but no. We're going to take the inside of the model and take out some of that geometry with this specific distance between all the different surfaces that are in that. Kind of a fun little tool. So again, we're going to go to the Feature tab on Command Manager. We're going to scroll all the way over here to the right-hand side to this icon over here called the shell. We're going to go ahead and select that. Just like all the other features and some of the sketch elements in here, gives you a Properties Manager. We're going to start from the top and work our way down. Not quite as many options as there are in the fillets, but we're going to keep a lot of the default settings in here. So we're going to make our wall thickness, let's say, yeah, let's go ahead and stick with the default setting over here. In fact, let's make it 1/8 of an inch. So 0.125. And we could choose our units in there too. You can see that units button that kind of popped up. And yes, we have a selection box over here, which is open. Faces to remove, and it's got that green color to that. So one thing to keep in mind about this selection box is that it'll have a color next to it, especially if there's going to be 2 areas where you can make a selection. First one's going to be green, so it's going to show in the modeling area as being green whatever you select. And if you're going to have multiple thickness settings over here, anything you select over here is going to be pink. So it kind of helps you differentiate a lot of the items that are going on in the graphics area or the modeling area when you're making modifications to your model like what we're doing. So we're not going to show outward, we're going to show on the inside. We could, and we're going to cover a lot of these options later, but we can show the preview of that. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and select that so we can see what it looks like. So right now, gosh, I don't know, we didn't select anything, but if you can see that, if you can rotate that around and see what it's doing, it's actually shelling everything. It's going to make a kind of a cavity on the inside between where the hole is and where the surfaces are in the exterior of our model, including the top and the bottom. You can actually see that when you rotate that around. So without selecting anything, let's see what happens. Let's go to the green check mark. And yeah, nothing happened, did it? But let's see. This is kind of fun. A heads-up view toolbar. There's an item in here called section view. Let's go and click on that. It doesn't make any change to your model, but what it does is it cuts your model so you can actually see on the inside of it. We're not going to go through all the different options in here, but basically we're going to stick with the default settings in here. But if you rotate this around, you can actually see what it did. Kind of cool. It just shelled out the inside. Now, trying to create something like this, trying to manufacture something like this might be a little bit difficult, but you know, you could do whatever you like in SolidWorks. It's not going to care about manufacturing, but ultimately when you're putting parts together, you're going to have to think about manufacturing it. You're going to have to choose a way or a method in order to make it easy to manufacture, and of course if it's easy, it's going to be less expensive. But just to show you a couple different options in here, right now it shows the option off the front plane. So the very front plane, you can see what that looks like. If you go to the next one, it's going to be off the top plane. So now you can see what it looks like off the top plane. And the right plane is symmetrical to the front plane too. So it's going to look the same on the right plane as it will on the front plane. If you go to the green check mark over here, now it's got it sectioned. Now you might think that if you section this, you might be able to select that as a surface in order to do some additional modeling on. I don't think SolidWorks will allow you to do that because it really isn't defined in the model. It's kind of defined in a peripheral way. But you'll notice up here in the heads-up view toolbar that the selection tool is still kind of gray. The button's outlined, so it means it's selected. If you want to deselect that, get that out of that section mode, just go ahead and click on that. So let's go back to shell, right-click on that. And let's make a modification of that. What we really want to do is we want to shell the bottom so we can actually see what we're doing. So with the selection box open, let's go ahead and select the bottom face of that. And now we can see the preview, and that line that would have represented those lines in here, the yellow lines that would have represented that preview of the inside shelling of the model now extends all the way to the bottom. And if you go to the green check mark on that, again, after making that modification, now you can see what it looks like. So in a nutshell, that is the shell. Okay, in this video I'd like to show you a little bit about ordering things in our Feature Manager tree. As we talked about before in previous videos, a Feature Manager is all history based, but it doesn't mean that things are set in stone here. With parametric modeling, you can move things around a little bit, move the furniture around a little bit, and hopefully it doesn't disturb the neighbors when you do so. So let's check a couple things. Before we get started, let's go ahead and take that cut extrude and some of these other features in there, and let's go ahead and rename those again to something that's a little bit more descriptive. So for that cut extrude, let's go ahead and call that the top hole. So again, just like before, if you just take your cursor and slowly rest over it and click in there twice, you should be able to get that. And this one we'll call the top fillet. And then the shell, we'll just call that the bottom shell. And now let's have a little bit of fun. Let's go ahead and rearrange the furniture. What you do is you take your mouse, you left click it on one of the features in here, and you can move it around. So if you move that around, you try to move the base plate down and try to put it somewhere else in the Feature Manager tree, it's not going to let you do that. And the reason is obvious here, because you have to have some sort of substance there to put a hole in it, put a fillet on it, and to shell it. And if you don't have that substance there, if you try to put another feature on top of that, it's just not going to like it. Not going to like it at all. But we can move some of these other ones around. So let's see if we can move that top hole around. Doesn't look like we can move the top hole around. I believe the reason why we can't do that is because we have it kind of related to that hole. So we put an edge of that fillet, one of the edges of that fillet along that hole. So the hole has to come first before the fillet. And we can't put the fillet on top of the hole either too. But we can put the shell up towards the top of the tree. So let's do this. Let's take a rollback bar, right click on the top hole, take the rollback bar and roll that up there. So what the rollback bar does is allows you to go back in time to see what things look like before that. So what we did is we put in that bottom shell at the rollback bar, and we're kind of hiding the things that are below that. We're going to take a look at what that looks like. And it looks pretty basic. What we did is we took the shape that we had in there with the sketch fillets in place, and we shelled out the inside. So if we were to take that section tool, take a look at the inside over here, that's kind of what it looks like. So let's go to the green check mark, and a lot of these changes we're going to go ahead and look at with that section tool in place. So let's see what happens with that top hole. So yeah, now that's predictable. The top hole kind of goes down from the top of the bottom, and all it does is kind of penetrate that shell on top of, that 1/8 inch thickness portion of the shell there. Then our top fillet kind of goes along the top there too, and it goes along that hole and kind of creates some geometry in there that doesn't look like it's going to be very stable. Looks like it's probably going to break right along that edge. So that may not be a good thing to have. So order does matter here. But let's try this. Let's take our top fillet. Let's try clicking that and have a little bit of fun with that. Let's go ahead and take that portion that defines that hole, the fillet along the hole, and take that out. All I did was unselect it. So I took that edge and just selected it again, and it takes it out of the selection box up here. And if we go to the green check mark, now I think we can move that fillet around a little bit. So we can take that fillet and put it up top. That looks a little bit better. And of course the shell shells correctly. And if we put the fillet beyond the shell, you can see what that does. And our top hole, we can probably move that around too. So we can maybe make that top hole, put that on top of the top fillet and just below the shell and see what that looks like. So you have the capacity to move that around. But let's take that fillet and pull that all the way up to the top. Let's take a rollback bar, and again we're going to roll that to just underneath the top fillet. And let's add some stuff to that and see what happens with this. So we're going to take that top fillet, and we're also going to select this bottom edge down here with the tangent propagation, and now you can see the preview of that. And if you go to the green check mark, then we can see that we have that fillet going along the bottom. So let's see what happens when we do the shell. Yeah, it looks pretty straightforward. And if you do the hole, that seems to work too. But let's take that top hole and move that above the shell and see what happens there. That seems to work out okay. And again, depending on how you have the relationships here, depends on how it kind of works out. So now we put the bottom shell in just below the top plate. So let's take a rollback bar and roll that back and see what that looks like. Now what we're trying to do with the top fillet is we're trying to fillet both the top and the bottom, if you remember that. So right click on that. Let's go to Edit Feature. But before we do that, this is kind of a dialog box here. It tells you what's wrong. It tells you what's going on here. It says you cannot create a valid fillet chamfer because either the filleted chamfer face is self-intersecting or the loop is bad. But I think the self-intersecting thing is probably what we're looking at. So let's right click. Let's go to Modify and see what's happening. So it kind of looks like it's trying to do a preview. It's got kind of a yellow and green dash line in here. When you get something like that, it means it can't give you the preview. It's not going to quite work. And I think the reason behind that is we have an 1/8 inch wall over here, and we're trying to put in a 0.3 inch fillet in here, and it's taken out a good portion of that wall down here, and it's unable to resolve that. But if we were to take that fillet and put it on top of the shell, now it's able to do that. Now the shell feature is actually selecting this surface down here, and the fillet's able to resolve itself because of that. So order matters. Bottom line here, order matters how you put this together. You might want to play around with that when you get errors. This gives you an opportunity to play around with those errors and try to correct those errors and try to understand these errors. And as you're putting your model together, you might want to avoid these errors, know how to fix them when you get there, but you certainly don't want to have errors propagating through your model because it'll make your model unstable, which will make SolidWorks unstable. So get good, solid modeling geometry down from the very beginning. Start with your sketch. Make sure it's all well defined. If you want to have it well defined, if it's going to be well defined, ultimately do it from the very beginning and make sure your features are nice and tight and proper where they should be.